I know in those moments when I don't want to go to Mass that I have learned that is resistance keeping me away, because when I am at Mass, something happens that fills my spirit and my soul.
Yes.
That's what he is there for. That's what he has promised us.
And he's so good at that.
Right.
Big reminder, like, oh, you're here. I'm
know.
so glad you're here.
This episode of Beyond Sunday is sponsored by the Pime Missionaries. The Pime Missionaries are Catholic priests and brothers changing lives and sharing the merciful joy of Christ with those who need it most through the Pime Sponsorships at a Distance program. Become a Pime sponsor today and bring lasting change to the life of a child, youth, person living with disabilities, or a seminarian. Learn about the impact that you can have at pimeusa.org/52sponsorships.
Welcome to Beyond Sunday, a podcast for parents like us, striving to weave the Sunday experience into the everyday moments of our week. I'm your co-host, Nicole Joyce.
And I'm your other co-host, Rakhi McCormick. Have a seat wherever is comfortable, grab a drink, take a deep breath, light a candle if you must, and join us as we talk, laugh, and sometimes cry about our experience raising Catholic families and discovering God within our everyday lives. I want to say we don't cry nearly as often as I thought we would, and the fact that neither one of us are criers
probably makes it worse.
Probably does, so maybe we won't cry.
Maybe not.
Okay.
But I do like lighting candles, but I feel like we should not be doing that inside.
No, I don't think we're allowed to.
Yeah, there's rules about that.
I know. My students are always like, why don't you light a real candle? I'm like, because we are in a school building.
Because rules.
Yeah.
So, Rakhi.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first Holy Communion?
No.
But you were an adult.
I was. I just wanted to be contrary. My contrarian spirit is coming out. Yes. Yes, I do remember my first Holy Communion, Nicole. I was 20.
You were 20.
I was 20.
Beautiful. My husband was 30, I think, when he received his first communion. I was actually in second grade. Yes.
Okay.
And I do. The things I remember were being the shortest person in class, and we had to line up by height, like shortest to tallest. So I was like the very first kid in line to, process down the aisle, and wearing socks over my tights, which was very 1988 to wear socks over your tights. I don't know if you remember that phase.
I mean, I don't. We did leg warmers, not so much the socks.
So this was like socks with ruffle over white tights with my first communion shoes.
That might have just been like a first communion 80s thing.
I don't know. And definitely, I know I did not have a real grasp of what or who it was that I was receiving until I was much older.
Yeah. So receiving the Eucharist as a young adult in college really only gave me just a short leg up on you, one that did not wear socks over tights because it was the late 90s, and so we were into socks with sandals.
Oh,
grunge was in, Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins. So seriously, though, even with a little bit more knowledge, because of course, going through the RCIA classes, we cover who it is and what it is, and even the way that I came into the church with that mystical experience of the Eucharist, it really isn't something that we can wrap our heads around on our own. Like, like Jesus says, flesh and blood has not revealed this to you. I always feel like I should say that in a James Earl Jones voice. Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you.
That was actually surprisingly accurate.
Thank you.
Yes, very well done. Can you do Darth Vader?
No. Luke, I am your father.
So, friends, moving on. We are approaching the solemnity of the most holy body and blood of Christ, also known as Corpus Christi. And this is the time when we really celebrate the real, true presence of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist.
Yes.
And it's such a beautiful, wonderful solemnity. So we thought this week would be a great time to talk more about the Eucharist. Yeah. Some of you may know that we in the United States are actually in the middle of what we're calling a Eucharistic Revival. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has kind of designated this 3-year period to be a revival of the Eucharist. And it started last year on Corpus Christi with kind of the diocese, the curia members really starting to launch this in. And now we're entering into this year for the parishes to really embrace this too. And we're trying to inspire a love for the Eucharist in people around the country. And this is just such a great way for us to do this. And we've already done an episode about adoration in the Blessed Sacrament, which, of course, is a wonderful way of deepening our relationship with Jesus in the Eucharist. But this week, we really want to focus on how we can instill a love for the Eucharist into our families and incorporate it into the things we do every day.
Right. Right, absolutely, because, not all of us can sit in an adoration chapel all day, and most of us are not called to do that. And truly, that isn't the primary purpose of the Eucharist either.
Amen.
Right?
Yes.
Like, the Eucharist is food. It's food for the journey.
Yes.
So I think one of the questions that always rests on my heart is how can we help people to really believe that what Jesus says is true? Reports have shown, if we believe statistics, reports have shown that even a large majority of self-identified Catholics harbor some skepticism about the real presence.
Yeah.
Like, it was a shocking percentage to me of people who did not necessarily believe that Jesus is truly present.
Sure.
Body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist.
And even in that percentage of people who do believe it,
right,
there's still a large percentage of those people who do believe it who still don't come to Mass to receive him.
Well, right.
Which is kind of scary, maybe a little sad.
Yeah. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. I mean, I think that there are reasons for that. But again, like, given how many people harbor that skepticism, and given my own experience with the power of the Eucharist, even before I was Catholic, like, I wonder often how do we lead others to have those encounters with Jesus there as well? And, and I do think that that's the impetus of the National Eucharistic Revival.
Absolutely.
Also. Like, if the Eucharist is the source and summit of our faith, if it is food for the journey, if we believe, which we do, that Jesus is really present, how do we make our actions meet our words?
Yes, and I think I've said this a million times before. If you have met Jesus Christ and he has changed your life forever, how do you not let that change everything about the way you live?
Right. But again, like, I get it. Even in the scriptures, we read, like, it was too hard for people to believe.
Sure.
And they walked away.
Yeah. And I got to give a shout out to I Am Here.
Oh, my goodness,
I Am Here campaign. You can find it at iamhere.org. Is a wonderful, beautiful place to hear testimonies from real people from right here in Detroit.
And they're all across the board.
Yes. Different backgrounds, different cultures, different ages, and how beautiful their experience in coming back to the church was in experiencing Jesus in the Eucharist.
Right. And, like, different encounters with the Eucharist, too. Like, it's not all we sat in front of.
Yes, it's not all adoration.
Tabernacle and adoration.
Right.
Yeah, like really beautiful stories.
Yes.
But also, one thing I've been doing, especially with my older kids, because seeing is believing these days, right? We're all a little bit of Thomas. Until I see, I shall not believe. Right. But one thing I've started doing is showing my older kids and my students different Eucharistic miracles.
Yes.
When we're talking about Jesus being fully present. Because it's super hard to wrap our heads around it. Like, it doesn't make sense. But what I'm receiving is bread and wine, and you're telling me that once the priest says the prayers, like, this actually becomes Jesus, and we can get too into the theological, the accidents and the properties and all of that. That's too much for most people. And for those of you who are not familiar with Eucharistic miracles, these are instances where a consecrated host begins to show the presence of flesh or blood.
Yes. And
truly, like, they're fascinating. And, I shared it with my classes, and really, they were absolutely fascinated. Like, they're never silent. I mean, these are they're never silent.
Yeah.
But, like, they were just like, what?
Yeah.
And it led to a beautiful discussion of how God gives us signs and wonders to increase our faith. Like, this isn't a normal thing. The Eucharist, the host doesn't usually turn into flesh or blood. But we believe that what Jesus says is true and that he is truly present. And so that gave them, like, a visual to begin to contemplate the truth of what Jesus says. And they were also floored that it was a teenager who compiled that whole online database of Eucharistic miracles.
Yes, shout out to Blessed Carlo.
Yeah, I love Blessed Carlo. He is such a great help for me in working with my older kids and our teens. But a couple of the miracles that I shared with them, which captivated them. One is the one that's shared in 52 Sundays. It's the Eucharistic miracle in Buenos Aires. And they love that Pope Francis is the one who called for the investigation into the last.
Very cool.
They had 3 instances, and that third one was elevated by then Archbishop, or was he a cardinal at that point? Cardinal Bergoglio. Yeah, was the one who called the experts to investigate. So they think that's super cool. And then the other one that I like to share is a miracle that happened in Venezuela, and it has a video that goes with it. And I'm going to tell you, like, this one really captivated the boys. The boys were like, that's so weird and cool.
Videos are very helpful.
Right? And so like the host is actually pulsating like a heart.
Yes, that one is amazing.
Yeah. And so again, like they're captivated by all of this, and sharing with them like the number of reviews this goes through. Like the church doesn't just take things on faith. We believe things on faith, but we believe in reason as well. And so like the independent agencies that are called in, the independent labs that are called in to confirm what we believe is happening, and that do confirm that there are traces of, I'm going to get the wording wrong because I am not a scientist, but whatever the flesh of the heart is.
Yes, like
mitochondrial.
The
Is that
yes.
mitochondrial?
No.
Anyway,
yes,
the heart.
The heart muscle.
The heart muscle of somebody who has gone through a trauma, and that the blood type is always the same.
Yes,
There's
so much science there
right.
that really kind of makes it feel like, wow, that I really do need to be paying attention to this.
Yeah,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, for somebody who might be a little bit of a skeptic, like they need to see to believe. God is so good.
Yes.
And He's made that possible. And there's so many more listed in the database to share in the whole traveling exhibit. Anyway, I think it's cool. And so I can go on and on. But
it's very cool. And I think if we can get our families to be really aware of Jesus' presence in the Eucharist, that number one, that's like the primary impetus for coming and participating in Mass.
Absolutely.
Right? Because the liturgy is where we are there in the presence of the source and summit of our faith.
Right. And like Jesus didn't do all of this. He didn't offer Himself to us so that we could stand and gape at Him from a distance.
Right. He wants you
it's
to
the most
receive
intimate act,
Him.
right?
Yes.
So He could live in us, continue to strengthen us, and to give us life.
Yeah. So the big question is like, how do we, this is like the number one most received question ever. How do I get my kids to engage in Mass in a way that's meaningful and understand what's really happening? Sometimes it's worded different. Like, how do I get them to be quiet? But we know what you really mean. We know that what you really mean is you want your kids to know that Mass is important.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have a few things that are really helpful, especially if your kids are super little. In my house, everything was done like in levels. Like we just slowly graduated. So in the beginning, all we wanted to do was like get them to participate in small gestures that they could make with the congregation, making the sign of the cross, saying amen at the right time, bowing and kneeling at the right times. But there are some really great resources out there in addition to 52sundays.com, which of course I think is like the ultimate resource really, because you can read the gospel before you come to Mass. The kids know what they're going to hear. They can listen for like a keyword, really make Sunday come alive. But there are some other things that have really been helpful. One that was great for my kids was the Picture Missal from Loyola Press, which is actually designed for students with different disabilities, but it has very simple pictures on each page about what we're going to do. We're going to stand, we're going to sing, we're going to listen to Father talk, we're going to kneel, we're going to receive the Eucharist, or my parents are going to go up and receive the Eucharist, so they can kind of follow along with that. And then the other one is the Missal for Young Catholics, which is another option for the kids if they want to read the Gospel during Mass.
Okay.
And it has like vocabulary words in it, like some of the words from the Gospel that might be difficult. It also has all of the other pieces of the Missal in there so that they want to follow along with the Eucharistic prayer.
Okay.
If they want to hear the collect, they'll be able to find all of that in there as well, with really beautiful artwork too. Yeah.
That's important. Yeah. Yeah, I think a couple things that have helped us. One is from the time they're super little, like I'm talking not even a year old, right? Even as a baby, as I'm holding them. And this is something that I witnessed another parent do when I wasn't even close to, like, I think Tim and I were maybe just dating. And we were hanging out with this family. We went to Mass. We were on retreat with them. We went to Mass, and they were holding their daughters. And at the point of consecration, super little, just pointing, right? Like, that's Jesus.
Yes.
Jesus is on the altar, like really here. And so even those little things, like they don't have to necessarily be able to cognitively understand it, but just to begin to whisper those things into their being.
And if anything, it's easier when they're little, right?
Right, because you can hold them.
You can kneel down to a 3-year-old and say, that's Jesus. And he believes you because you're a mom, right? Yeah. You can genuflect in front of the tabernacle and say, Jesus is in there, and they know it.
Yeah. But they do know it. And that witness of faith, my middle child would often, like when we dropped the older one off at school at the beginning, would want to go and sit before the tabernacle. And that became our tradition. Like we would just go and sit and pray. So that was one thing. And then the other thing, one of our friends gifted us, I don't know what I would call it. It's like a little I Spy board type thing. It's got little sliders.
Oh, yes.
And so,
you
like,
slide the little thing
as
over
things happen at Mass.
Yes, I love that.
And so for somebody who needs to be a little bit more active, that was a really good one. And then I have a friend who also sells, like, busy boards for Mass where they, like, they're, I don't know exactly if it's magnet. I don't think it's Velcro because she's a mom and she wouldn't create something that makes a bunch of noise. But, like, they can put the pieces onto the board as it's happening too.
Yeah.
And then it's in picture form as opposed to words. So if they're not readers yet, then it's a way for them. And there's a lot of different beautiful, like, busy books and mass books for children out there to help them engage in that. But when we're talking about the Eucharist and how do we instill a love for that in our children, I think our witness is the biggest thing, and just reminding them.
Yeah, I was actually going to touch on that. I think one of the things we get asked a lot is, like, how much talking is too much talking during Mass? How much wiggling is too much wiggling, right? Like, so we always have tolerated, like, an age-appropriate amount of wiggling, but we do start from a very young age that, like, once we kneel and the consecration is about to begin, Mom is praying because this is really important because Jesus is here now. And so we don't ask questions during this part. You can ask me any question you want after Mass is over. But I'm just asking for this last little bit of time for us to be quiet and listen for what Jesus might have to say to us.
Right.
Yes. And I'm not going to lie. I have an 8-year-old who's already received First Communion, who sometimes I still have to remind her, your question can wait for 3 more minutes. Right? Like,
and it is. It's not be quiet, but it's not yet.
This isn't important.
This is not the time.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Our eyes are on Jesus right now.
And it's very gentle. It's not, we talked about this last episode even. Like, it's not like you're in trouble. It's I'm going to model this for you, that this is a really important moment.
I mean, I will be honest, there are those times when they've asked questions like every 30 seconds up until that point too, and that might be an exasperated, you just need to be quiet.
Right. We've all been there.
Right. But no, I think that there is a beauty in that. And there are so many other ways that we can incorporate the Eucharist into our lived experience. Maybe we participate in a procession if our parish does like a Eucharistic procession. A lot of them will for Corpus Christi. And so taking your children to do that. We have a beautiful picture of Tim carrying, I'm going to say it was our youngest. I can't remember now. It was one of the boys on his shoulders as we were processing around the parish. Nothing big, but it's important. Again, like, kids learn what's important by what we do. And so maybe a 40 hours devotion, that's too much for kids.
Right.
But, to talk about or for us as parents to maybe participate in something like that. And I would challenge us because, again, I think sometimes the Eucharist can become a symbol. Not in the way that, like,
not like in the heretical sense.
Right. Not in the sense that we don't believe that it's Jesus, but that if a person were to look at our actions, it would be something that we just look at or display as opposed to incorporate. So I would encourage us to find one more day a week that we can go to Mass. Maybe it's not during the year. Maybe it's over the summer. Maybe it's in Advent and Lent. Maybe it's an evening Mass in parishes, if you're listening, and evening Masses during the week.
Yes.
Right? Because most of our parishioners work from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or whatever. I mean, that's a discussion we've had in our parish.
Yeah.
Or maybe some of us have had in our parish and we haven't moved forward. But regardless, I would encourage us to find another way to participate in the liturgy.
Yeah.
More than once a week. I mean, honestly, if it's food for the journey, if it's what's giving us strength, we wouldn't go 5 days without eating.
Sure.
One would hope, even if you're an
intermittent.
Thank you. My words are not forming. Faster. You don't fast for 5 days. Right. Like, we need it. We absolutely need it. And I know in those moments when I don't want to go to Mass that I have learned that is resistance keeping me away, because when I am at Mass, something happens that fills my spirit and my soul. Yes. That's what he is there for. That's what he has promised us.
And he's so good at that.
Right.
Big reminder, like, oh, you're here. I'm so glad you're here.
Like, that is all he desires, is for us to be with him. And I would say then the other thing would be to practice being more reverent about the Eucharist at Mass.
Yes.
Maybe it's incorporating some prayers. I mean, these are wordy and kind of long and old language, but St. Thomas Aquinas has beautiful prayers for before and after receiving the Eucharist. The Anima Christi is a beautiful prayer, and it's simple enough to teach your children.
Yeah.
But to really practice being reverent.
Yes.
Understanding that Jesus meets us where we are and as we are.
Of course.
But that we believe that the King of the universe is here.
Yes.
And how beautiful and humbling that is.
Yeah. And we've said this before,
right?
Like, our actions are an outward sign of our inner disposition.
Yeah.
So teaching our children that what we do on the outside represents what we're feeling and believing on the inside is so important.
Right.
So even when they're small, teaching them to genuflect in front of the tabernacle is like that's the easiest thing to do when they first start really paying attention.
It's harder
at
for
Mass.
us old people whose knees don't want to work.
Oh my gosh, I know. Sometimes I look at Father Genuflect when he first comes in, not holding on to anything, and I'm like, how does he do that?
I'm like,
Yes. But some other things like in everyday life that are really helpful, I think, even when they're very small, is making it a priority to share a family meal together where you can.
Well, I mean, Jesus is food, so
right, and connecting that to Jesus breaking bread with the disciples and connecting it to the idea that what you are what you eat. Even just those simple things that they've already heard, like at school or on PBS, whatever. Like those are all really helpful for them to think about. And I remember one time we were driving to school and my kids wanted to call my mom, and we tried to call and she didn't answer. And I said, "Oh, I think Mug is at Mass," and they were like, "But it's Wednesday. Why is Mug at Mass on a Wednesday at 8:00 in the morning?" And I said, "Well, what happens when we go to Mass?" And thank God they actually knew the answers. They were like, "Oh, well, we get Jesus." And I was like, "Yes." I said, "And why do we want to receive Jesus?" Like, to be more like him. Like they were on fire. And I was like, "Yes." And I was like, "Well, Mugga is really lucky because she's retired, and she doesn't have to go to school or work anymore, so she can go every morning at 8:00 and receive Jesus." I was like, "Don't you think that's pretty cool that she gets to receive him and be strengthened to be more like him every single day of the week?" And they were like, "Yeah, when we retire, we want to go to Mass every day too." Awesome. And it all came together, and it was just like this beautiful little moment of like, oh, this is all making sense to us now.
My friend's dad used to call it the breakfast of champions.
Breakfast, yes,
it's not Wheaties, it's the Eucharist.
Right, there you go.
Right. The other thing is we genuflect when we pass a Catholic church because we know Jesus is present. Yes. And by we, I mean me, and then the kids go, "Oh yeah."
But it happens so quickly, right? They see us make the sign of the cross while we're driving by a church.
Again,
and
like
then
super subtle things.
Yes.
And not to be showy, like the purpose isn't to be showy, but like, again, our actions reflect our inner disposition. Yes. And so when we believe that Jesus is present and we want to be reverent, like it shows, it's to honor and glorify him.
Yes.
To acknowledge that he is there.
Oh, friends. This is our goal for you this week.
Yeah.
Find one way to grow an appreciation for the Eucharist this week. Whatever works for your family. There's some beautiful stuff on 52sundays.com. If you have a procession at your parish, that's a marvelous way to do it because you're outside. Nobody cares if you're loud.
Right.
You're just walking. It's a parade.
Your kids can, dance or jump if they want to.
Yes.
It's all good. And I would say if you want to level up, consider inviting somebody who hasn't been to Mass in a while to come with you.
Ooh, mega challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is you want to dive deeper into really being Eucharist, because the Eucharist feeds us, but it also unites us.
Yes.
There's a reason we call it communion. Right. Consider inviting somebody who hasn't been to Mass in a while to come back.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to Beyond Sunday. We hope that you are filled with the life of our Lord as we approach Corpus Christi, that he truly does become food for your journey, and that your families are able to encounter him in such a special way this weekend with the Feast of Corpus Christi. Find more episodes at 52sundays.com/podcast or subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of Beyond Sunday has been sponsored by the Pime Missionaries. The Pime Missionaries are Catholic priests and brothers changing lives and sharing the merciful joy of Christ with those who need it most through the Pime Sponsorships at a Distance program. Become a Pime sponsor today and bring lasting change to the life of a child, youth, person living with disabilities, or a seminarian. Learn about the impact that you can have at pimeusa.org/52sponsorships.